So before the break, we have the last session of this morning, which is an interesting session. We will have Dr. Gabriel Hertz, who is a nephrologist and trained psychoanalyst, and our patient partner, Janet Wright, who have been kind enough to help us. And the idea of this session is to initiate a dialogue to try to understand some of the unmet need and concern from a patient perspective that is not necessarily medical. And so without ado, I will just ask Gabriel and Janet to come to the podium. Thank you.
So maybe we can move it a little bit so we can try to simulate a conversation. I guess first of all, I'd like to thank Jörg for his courage in allowing us to do something new and different. So there won't be any slides. It'll be we're going to try to have an intimate conversation in a large room with a lot of people. And I guess Janet and I, we had a chance to meet a few weeks ago. Can everybody hear okay? Yeah, okay. So I guess we had a chance to meet a few weeks ago. And I think right at the beginning, I think I sort of told you, look, I've never done this before. And you said exactly the same thing. Neither have you. And I guess we both thought maybe now that we new to this, why don't we go forward and see where it goes? And so in the way of a conversation, we really don't know where we will meander. So and we can only find out at the end. I guess one of, when I think back to our conversation, one of the thoughts that stayed with me is, how you perceive this as a path, that in a way you've been on a road. And I guess what I'm wondering is, do you have a sense of the road you've been on before you knew about your diagnosis, and perhaps if the road changed after, or how it changed after?
Yes, prior to being diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease, life just went on, and went to school, had fun, partied, got married, had children, and then when I was diagnosed in my mid-30s, I had a huge challenge in dealing with my body image. The disease affected my liver and my kidneys, and my liver was so large I still looked pregnant after my third child was born. I ended up having 3 surgeries on my liver to remove some of the cysts, and that had helped. And then as my cysts on my liver were removed, my kidneys got bigger. So that path was emotional. It affected my self-esteem. It impacted the intimacy in my relationship with my husband. And eventually I just had to push through and kind of get over it. But it was trying, I must admit. I'm moving into 4th stage and end stage PKD. I look at now my path as how long am I going to have my kidneys. I don't want to go on dialysis. How do I get a live donor? Because that's something, from what I understand, is typically something you do on your own, try to find someone to donate, just because of the way the process works within the medical system. So it's been a choppy journey, I must admit.
And along the way, when you talk about a choppy journey, have there been sort of way stations that stand out in your mind, or certain points that you remember?
Yes. Just to go back with some history, my grandfather had PKD and he died of an aneurysm. My dad and his 3 brothers and his sister had PKD, and they're all deceased. My father died when he was 57. So when I hit that age of 57, I felt my day was up, that I was going to follow his path. So psychologically, that definitely affected me. Depression set in. So each step was, I had to transform and move into a different new normal.
It sounds also that along the way, it's almost as if your sense of your life horizon became foreshortened.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I look at the fact that we have a grandchild now and another one on the way, and will I be able to see my other grandchildren? And I'm 64 right now, and when I hit 60, my kidney function just went like this. I'm on my medications, like tolvaptan being one of them, and that's another new normal when you're up and down like literally like a toilet seat going to the washroom, sleep deprived. It is a challenge, and the medical system, I think, sometimes looks at the organ more so than the individual. When I first started seeing a kidney specialist, that person assumed that I knew everything about PKD, and I didn't know anything. Our family didn't talk about it. My aunts and uncles didn't talk about it. It was just, it's there, it's fact, and get on with it. And so when I watched my dad look pregnant as he grew older, we didn't discuss it.
Do you think there was a sense of stigma within the family about it? Like, was there, in terms of having the illness?
Well, I think there's 2 things. One is the generation, in terms of everything is okay, and not to worry about the disease, because my father and his siblings were all well taken care of. In this generation, like, I know of an individual who has such anxiety, this person is not able to even look at the reports that come back from the physician. And I know of another individual who doesn't want anybody to know that they have PKD because it might impact their career. So I think this generation looks at the disease differently than my parents' generation.
And so I guess what you're saying is, I mean, we can look at kidneys with cysts and we can talk about numbers and kidney function, but the issue is how does that kidney shape that unique individual's sense of themselves and their lives? And I guess the question is, do you have a sense, when you interact in the clinic or you meet different people, that there's an attunement or maybe even a sense of trying to understand that? Or is there perhaps even time for that, let's say, when you've met different clinicians along the way?
Generally speaking, when I would meet with various physicians, it was always about the readings and the organ, not necessarily how are you dealing with this, what impact has it had on your family, what information, not information, what support do you need to get through these phases that one is going through. And it's no fault of the physicians, it's just the medical system and the process in which they work within.
So I guess when you talk about that, I mean, I get a sense of perhaps a certain culture, or perhaps, maybe even a kind of, when you're in the clinic, they speak a certain language, they speak Greek, and when you go in as a patient, you speak Spanish. and in a way then how much of a meeting of minds there is given the different perspectives or
Initially, it was Greek and Spanish, based on the reports of when you get the blood work back, and you know your potassium is this, your creatinine is this, and your EGFR is this. Like I went back and Googled, what do all these readings mean? Sometimes it's not explained, and sometimes it is. It depends on if you ask the question or not, I think, or if a person asks the question.
And I guess in terms of then having that support, or you know, in terms of navigating this road, do you think there's a sense, because it's a genetic illness, that there's an assumption that, well, you know, so many family members have it, so, you know, just talk with your family, talk amongst yourselves, kind of a thing. And maybe there are certain assumptions along the way, I wonder.
I believe there are assumptions. You know, based on my parents' situation, I didn't know what my father was going through. In our family, our children will say, "Well, how are you doing, Mom?" And I'll say, "Fine." Is this what you mean by the question?
To some extent, in terms of, like, yes, I guess in terms of how you navigated, really, you know, coping with this illness, coping with your kidneys and your liver, but also being within a family unit that's also coping with it. And I wonder how much sharing there is in the family of the experience.
With my extended family, because there's a few people cousins that have the disease, we now meet on a regular basis and we share experiences. You know, we compare notes in terms of what our readings are. I'm kind of the guinea pig because I'm the oldest of the three. So we'll see what Janet does, you know, in terms of how I'm going to be dealing with either dialysis or a kidney transplant. When it comes to my siblings, there isn't a lot of communication. Maybe I've got part of my parents and it's okay, I'll be fine. I have a lot of faith in the medical system. I have a lot of faith with the support team I have right now. And do I share all that with my family? No, not always. And I don't know why.
So I get a sense that then, in a way, at times you're very much alone with this.
Yes, and that impacts, makes you feel sad sometimes. It's like sometimes I wish I could take those pictures of the kidney and put it out here and say, because people say, "Oh, Janet, you look great." And they're, "No, I don't. I've got these honking big things in my belly," you know. But people don't understand that. Yeah, so it's kind of like a hidden disease. It's like almost like mental health. You know, it's external. You can't see it externally, but it is internal.
And so I wonder if also in some ways it's a two-edged sword, because as you say, people don't see it, but you know you have it. But also, I guess I wonder whether if people do know you have it, do you think it changes their perception of you?
I would say, for me personally, no. For others that I have discussed this with, yes. Because then again, going back to this individual who's, you know, doesn't want anybody, only close people know, because externally, if someone else knows, they might miss a business opportunity, as an example, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I guess what resonates for me when you say that is that I guess having an illness is really about coming to terms with losses. And you talked about the sadness and about mourning. And I wonder whether we don't appreciate enough how much loss is a part of having this illness and coping with it.
That is a good way to phrase it. It is a loss. It's a loss because one feels alone. It's a loss because you can't do the things you used to be able to do. It's a loss because of fatigue, so you miss living your day in terms of your old normal, so you have to adjust to the new normal. It's a loss, self-esteem, you know? So yeah, it's there. So it's, and I don't know outside of yourself that someone who focuses on that type of thing from a support and counseling perspective, you know, because I have seen counselors in the past and they don't get it. So maybe when one goes in to see have their first appointment with a doctor, that they should have maybe a roster of saying, you know, here's the support, here are the types of people that you should or I can connect you with. That's specific to PKD. Nutrition being one of them.
I mean, I guess what you're saying is, and I tend to think of it that I think in a way, I think PKD is a unique, and as you're talking about, or you mentioned before about how there was always this sort of signpost of turning 60, and how, I was just reflecting back on what you were saying. And so I wonder whether in a way, part of what you've had to deal with is that there's always this sort of signpost because there are very close people, a parent, an uncle, a cousin, etc., who when they turned 58 or who when they turned 60, something happened. And so I wonder if that becomes really a very strong thought or a kind of a, you know, a kind of something that's out there, but it's always there. And
absolutely, absolutely. My uncle had 2 kidney transplants. First one when he was 60, and the second one when he was 63. For the record, I'm 64. And so when I hit 60, it was yikes. And now where I am, all I can remember is him being really unwell. And he ended up getting cancer from the anti-rejection drugs. And that scares the bejesus out of me. So I look at what my dad went through and my uncles, and even my grandfather with an aneurysm. All of these things, it's like an invisible monkey on your back. You carry it with you all the time.
And so, just maybe a strange question. So what do you think about your kidneys?
What do I think about which?
Your kidneys.
Ugh.
I know it's sort of a strange question.
Well, let's just say by going through the changes of a new normal to another new normal to another new normal, I built a lot of character. You know, like you have to survive and you can't wallow in it. You know, like once in a while I'll have a pity party and, okay, get up and get going, you know, and I give myself permission to have that pity party. But I do it by myself. And so I don't celebrate my kidneys by any stretch of the imagination. I wish I didn't have it. I'm blessed that our children don't have it, which is a gift. Yeah, I don't, and I'm not, I'm afraid of getting someone else's kidney in some ways because of, for emotional and also spiritual reasons. You know, you're taking on someone else's component, and does that component become part of you? And you don't have control over, you know, what that organ might bring to you. Like you hear about people getting a kidney transplant and they say, oh yeah, well Joe's talking to me, right? And I don't know how relevant that is or not, but there's fear.
See, in a way, I guess what that makes me think about is that perhaps your sense of your kidneys is that it's as if, you know, most of us get up in the morning, we take a shower, we don't think about our bodies, we just go about our business. And I wonder if in a way for you, to some extent, it's as if your kidneys are external to you. You're being held hostage, or you're being made to live a certain life with your kidneys. And so you're not free to just not care about things. And so I wonder, in a way, you bring up an important point, that the idea of then having a transplant introduces the same scenario, right? Am I going to be held hostage by another kidney that's going to bring its own package? And is that going to put me on a different road? Mm-hmm. But not necessarily a road that I have a choice about. Or
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Like recently, there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about it. Where when I was younger, I didn't think about it. And that's because that milestone wasn't, it was further out. Yeah. But yes, I feel like a hostage. That's a good way of putting it.
And I wonder if also the difficulty is that I wonder if at times there may be a disconnect, because you may go to the hospital and they say, listen, don't worry about it. You can get a transplant and you'll be as good as new. And I wonder if in a way, even the idea of a transplant is not as simplistic or as innocent as it may be presented. That, as you say, for you, it's like, it's a package, and it brings in some very unique aspects which perhaps may not be appreciated by the clinicians, the nurses, doctors, etc.
There's a lot of fear and there's a lot of anticipation of the unknown, right? Like we hear people with kidney disease that transplants are, you know, easy, there's 1% of failure, you know, there's all these statistics. And statistics are great, but when you're dealing with your being as, stats don't help. They don't help.
I mean, I guess the statistics go only so far for a lot of people, but really when it comes to you, it's going to be a unique road that, you know, it's going to be your road.
Yes. However, one can't be naive to really understand and appreciate that so many other people are going down this road. So that's when, you know, one gives themselves permission to have a pity party, and then you have to get on because you know other people have had success. They can go back to living a normal life. They don't end up sleeping like 12 hours a day. They're able to, depending on the disease, bend down and tie their shoes, you know, because the liver, the kidneys, you know, real estate starts to change. It's
So again, I'm just thinking about what you were saying. So do you find in a way there's the dichotomy of being alone, but I wonder if there's a certain comradeship or support in knowing that you're not alone because there are other people with in a similar situation or going through?
yes, there's camaraderie. However, I don't know who they are. I don't know who they are. I just assume how they feel. based on my point of reference, but that's not accurate because everybody does think and feel and do things differently. And I think that's where it's important with, I don't know, maybe the intake process when you're diagnosed with PKD to kind of understand the person and then move them into a certain level of or type of psychological support or a focus group with like-minded people, you know, to bounce ideas off and, you know, share recipes.
And maybe that's the idea that perhaps through sharing, one will not feel so much alone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also being able to open up, you know, because as much as I'm an advocate, but I'm also very private. And I'm sure there's a lot of other people that feel the same way.
I think you're private, but I think you're also very strong.
Mm-hmm.
Just coming out here and doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's just difficult to describe.
I think perhaps having an illness, any illness, but perhaps having this illness is so complicated that unless somebody else shares it, it may be very hard to communicate that.
It is difficult to find the words, and it's difficult to even to translate what you know from a scientific perspective, like the stats and the readings and whatever, and translate that so your loved ones can understand that. It's difficult.
Do you find, you know, speaking of loved ones, do you find that the illness changing, because you talked about body image and the change in intimacy, do you find that it impacts relationships like this?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's, as mentioned earlier, like when I was first diagnosed, it was difficult for me to feel comfortable with the new normal. And I think it was also difficult for my husband. For other people, yeah, it does change a little bit, the relationships.
I'd like to thank you, and I guess we should be empathetic to the coffee break requirements.
Anybody caffeine?
So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's right. I just want to thank Janet and Gabriel for a very interesting conversation. It's actually very enlightening to myself. I mean, I really don't quite understand the deep perspective, but from what I can learn from this conversation, that we all have sometimes challenges in life, and coping with sense of loss is a major challenge and takes a lot of resilience to overcome that. And I think that like from this, I would think that kind of a PKD patient peer support group of like-minded people coming together to share this kind of experience, supporting each other would be a very good initiative that we should consider. Like, and then it doesn't have to be limited to PKD patient in Toronto, but around the world. And maybe this is something that we should try to champion. Like, so I think that's something really I learned today from this conversation. And thank you to both of you.